Good day. This is the third week of Where Old and New Communication Strategies Meet. The third week is on plans and actions. Particularly, we're going to be talking about a consultant, and consultants can help. Our first consultant at the Lutheran Seminary at Philadelphia was a high school student. Now remember, this is prior to 2000. His name was Chris Razashaker, the son of the dean, Paul Razashaker, and this was his senior service project. Now, it sounds kind of strange, but this was a person who was headed toward college. He has 2 degrees now in computer technology, has worked for the government, and has worked in a number of major areas where his salary is more than his father or mine. Which is kind of intriguing because in one sense he was dedicated to doing a task that was interest to him, as well as also offering a service to the institution. But there were some things that he brought with him. He was quite aware of the mission of the Lutheran Theological Seminary. Both of his parents are pastors. His father was the dean of the seminary. He understood our culture. He had been on campus a lot. And he was capable of saying very clearly he had a firm delivery date. He wanted to make sure this was done in time enough so that he could graduate on time from his own high school. But at the same time, he was able to come to the campus and learn who we were, know what we were about, and see the kind of questions that we were raising, and at the same time raise questions for us about how we wanted to present those elements. So, in one sense, the guidelines that are written on page 47 of Speaking Faith are really quite helpful. As you look toward the possibility of even thinking about a consultant, those are the elements that you need to put in place and know that it's there. Now, I'm certain that some of you, if you don't have a website, you've had some robocalls or you've had some mailers which have asked you about, setting up your web page for a small fee or no fee, but you'll have the service contract of having them host your website. All of those are quite possible. But you need to be very careful about it because in one sense, they're in business. And sometimes your websites end up with advertisements on them. So that if you've gone to Thrivent and have a website with Thrivent, you understand that Thrivent is the advertiser that is going to be on your website at all times. There is a blogger to check out about the possibility of alternative websites or website development. That's Church Tech Today. The website is there on the screen. And at the same time, I'll make sure that after this element is posted, we'll post all the PowerPoints from all 3 weeks so that you can see those as well. But make sure that you're looking at those elements looking at the guidelines for hiring a consultant. Making sure that your goals are important. Too often, I think especially in today's environment where there are templates for websites, a person can put your material on a website and at the same time assume that those meet your goals. And we need to be able to evaluate alternatives. Look for experience, especially working with churches and or nonprofits so that their message gets out across rather than being this an advertising tool for the consultancy, making sure that they get more customers. We need to look for learners. Good consultants learn in the process. Chris did that for us. After that, he then put together about 2 or 3 more websites for other folks for which he then was compensated. That's not to say we didn't compensate him at the end as well. And ask for a proposal as people come together and ask you about giving you service. Check the references, be honest, and make sure that you then follow up with their references. Call other churches which have used their services, see how they're pleased or not pleased with the process, and so you interview them as much as they interview you. I haven't really thought much about television anymore, but at the same time, going back and looking at a book that's now 10 years old, it did raise some questions for me about the possibility of what TV can happen. having been a part of many of the discussions in the ELCA about using broadcast television and local cable. It just became way too expensive. Over the years, the ELCA has been a part of several discussions about ecumenical television. I think some of you may have heard of Vision, which merged into Odyssey, and now the Odyssey Network. And about the same time the Odyssey Network was developing, webcast became much more of a part of the process. And so as the technology evolved, so did the church's involvement. And so if you go to the Odyssey Network, or as they call themselves ON now, ON, you will see where the church is still involved in many of the broadcast elements of taking the church's message to the public. But television can be really quite expensive. Radio, on the other hand, does come with some cost, but it tends to have a much more local focus, especially for some of those who are not in major metropolitan areas. So that, as one of the congregations is a Circle congregation in Minnesota. Oh yeah, that reminds me, it was good to see Carl Robbie on your webpage. It's nice to know where our students came from. And Webb Renerick is in one of the smaller areas of central Pennsylvania. Likewise, she might say that radio may have some focus for her as well, but it does come with a cost. It's a local focus. There are things that you can do about advertising your special events at your congregations. There are even advertisements for the special seasons of the church that are available on local broadcast radio that you cannot do in a major metropolitan city like Philadelphia. There is the possibility of webcasting, and basically that's what we're doing right now. This is a webcast. You're signing on. Sometimes it's done live, so that you can ask live questions back and forth with the presenter. But this is sort of a delayed webcast. You're putting things online and asking those questions or posting materials at a later date. The seminary, for a number of years, did CDs of every preaching event, and sometimes even some of the videotapes of some of the convocation lectures were offered for sale after the event, especially the Preaching with Power events, which are now in their 30s in terms of years of presentation to the Philadelphia community. For a number of years, I was the primary camera person behind much of that development. And so DVDs, CDs, videotapes are all still possibilities for taking a broadcast message from the congregation out into the community in ways that are special. Many congregations used to take cassette tapes of broadcast services to the shut-ins, and then that became a process of putting those on DVD or CDs, depending upon whether or not you had just audio or audio and video. The question is, what are the goals? And if it's to bring people into the context of the worship life in a congregation, then I think there are ways in which that is really quite helpful, and especially if they appreciate it. You can always measure how the goals are achieved. For instance, my time on St. Croix, the Council of Churches there had a 20-minute radio broadcast, which we thought was both way too short, number one, and also at an odd time. It was from 10:10 to 10:30 every morning. Now, being the congregation closest to the radio station had its both benefits and distractions, especially when other pastors wouldn't show up for their assigned broadcast. So I got called by the radio station several times when someone wasn't there 5 or 10 minutes in advance and asked if I could come and fill in. Well, having both college and radio experience as a college student, but then also radio experience as a campus pastor at a college radio station in Ohio, I then began to put together things that were in the can, in other words, pre-recording those messages, so that if someone didn't show up, then they could be broadcast on time with some degree of regularity. But they were not theme sensitive or seasonal sensitive. They were just general kinds of pieces that could be played at any time during the course of any calendar year and in the process any church here. The radio station got bought, and at the same time then new ownership came in and did a review. What does the audience say about this? Well, as soon as they took that 20-minute broadcast off, I still don't understand how they got a 20-minute broadcast. It was amazing the number of phone calls they got asking where it was. So needless to say, they put it back. But putting things in a can for me was also saying very critically that scripting is essential for both radio, television, any kind of podcast. Even this particular presentation, I'm sitting here both with the books in front of me and a script in front of me so that I know where I want to go and how I want to get there, and I have some reasonable expectation of the time it will take to do all that. Web pages. Your web pages are an important element. I've had some real thrills looking at some of your web pages. That's been an awful lot of fun in many ways. That's where I saw the picture of Carl Robbie, one of our former students, who is a product of one of the parishes, and know that he is still very much involved in his congregation's life that spawned him. And at the same time, it means that we need to take seriously those looking at the 4 steps of evaluation and the 6 evaluation points in terms of looking at how we present ourselves to the world. All those elements are important because if we do not do the evaluation, if we do not take seriously the process of going about setting up the steps of who we are and how we then present ourselves to the world, it becomes an issue that then means that we're going to be counterproductive. For instance, now if you go to the website for the seminary today, you will see elements of finances and the foundation office very much on the front page. But back when that first website was developed, that same question was there as to whether or not we had a donation place on the front page. Now remember, as we're talking about the early days of web broadcasting or webcasting, webs were designed primarily to give information. That's why Google has become the term for search terms. People went to the internet for information. And so the seminary's website had to be designed to give information to people. And that is one of the elements I think is most important for parishes, to be able to give information to people, especially those who are not familiar with your parish, your congregation, or for me, the seminary. Now, over the years, that has changed because, in one sense, it has become a familiar place. If you notice that our seminary webpage is much more of a portal. It's a place where students go. It's a place where inquisitors go about what seminary life is all about. It's a place where funders go to see what is it we've been doing and how are we using the monies that have been given to us. So there are a number of things that the website does now that it did not do in the beginning. Even for us at this point, it's the portal for coming to this class. So websites have changed in the way in which they serve as a function for the institutions which produce them. But you need to be clear about what it is that you want the website to do for your congregation. I've been interested to see all of your websites have a portal for people in the congregation. So there's a members only area in which you have to have a password and to get into that area. I'm not certain that I want to know what's back there, but obviously those are private places for members of the congregation to share their business. Some congregations, and we'll talk about this again next week, is the whole issue of what is sensitive material. Many congregations put the activities of their children, which have been identifiable faces with it, in that private area. They do not put that as a part of the public area. I do remember seeing one picture of children at play. They were in a beanbag race, but they were at such a distance from the camera that their faces were not necessarily available for reproduction. I'm not certain that I'm as careful about that when I do the posting of photos of the congregation I'm serving, Christ Lutheran Upper Darby, on our Facebook site, where there are a number of pictures from our events on our church campus, like the Chicken Festival and the games that were played there. but it was a major community event, so those photos could have just as easily been signed to a newspaper or other elements so that they were in the public domain. But the websites for the congregations are here, and so the question is, and I haven't really tried to do this in the context of doing the PowerPoint, let's see if we can go to them and look at them. Ah, it does work. This is a Circle of Faith parish in Minnesota, and you'll see the three congregations as they come through the process of opening their front page. And the greeting is from Circle of Faith. The congregations welcome you to their website. Every place needs to have some things on it that are important. One is location, 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 how to get there. And when we have three parishes joined, it's interesting how they're all there, they're all presented, and you know what their times of worship are. So, looking at that, it's a great invitation to those who might be looking for a parish in the area, and they know how to get there, when to get there, and they're reasonably going to know that it's going to be a Lutheran parish. Now, let's see if I can get back to where I was. There we go. Good Shepherd Lutheran Parish. Is in New Jersey. And this Jersey parish also then has some photos on the front page, but most of them are of older folks. And so in one sense, they're talking about who they are. Their structure is that they have a primary calendar for the week on their web page. And so I'm assuming that that's a rotating calendar and it changes daily so that it doesn't, you give yesterday's schedule, it rotates through the process. There are calendars that are available for almost any website that do that. You just have to keep looking to make sure it's available to you. And then last but not least, there's one parish that I think you ought to go look at, and that's Upper Dublin Lutheran Church. Now, the reason I'm going to go there is that because one of the pastors is one of the books that we've been reading. This is where Keith Anderson is the pastor, and this website is much more detailed and has a whole lot of information in the context of it. But they also then have a number of staff people to work with that website. Obviously, Keith Anderson is also one of the pastors who does that, and he is quite adept at doing it. So that when you look around the website itself, there are lots of things going on. So that they even talk about their own Facebook pages, their Twitter pages, their YouTube pages, and the process welcoming you to investigate who they are and what they're about. And last but not least, I want to show you what a static website looks like as well. This is a website for my wife and I. Dawn is a national trainer for Godly Play, and I'm now retired. So in the process, we've put up a joint website that says who we are. It's listed under R.N. Stewart, but it's Dawn and Richard Stewart. It gives some information about Dawn and her work with Godly Play and her own experiences as a Christian educator for 20 plus years now. The children that are listed here, they're not children, they're the students that I taught while I was on sabbatical in South Africa. And they too got on the floor, including the one guy who had injured his knee in a soccer game. And then it also then refers you to the Godly Play Foundation, for whom she works. My website is a little bit different. It's also then talking about my work at the seminary, what I've done in the past. It probably needs to be updated since I'm now semi-retired, even though I thought I was wholly retired. And then some things about us. So that if you want to contact us, here are the way in which you can contact us directly. But it's a static site. It's an information site, and so it's there, it's available, you know how to get in touch with us, and anything beyond that, then you can talk to us directly. Some things about the old technology. There was a question raised about what old technologies could be used. Well, the telephone was one of those elements that's brought up in the book, and I thought, okay, this really is a 10-year-old book, because they talk about things like about the telephone, cell phones, pagers, PDAs. Well, your basic smartphone now is all of those combined into one unit. I still remember the days when there was one guy on a golf course who had 4 phones attached to his belt, and I was wondering why he was even trying to golf. Because he had a pager, a PDA, a telephone. He didn't have a camera at that point, but now your smartphone has all of those elements all wrapped up into one. But that still does not mean you don't have things like phone trees. What happens when it snows or you decided at the last minute to cancel church, especially in this past winter? Or are there ways in which you want to encourage folks to come out? So you do robocalls, or somehow you have that electronic capability of doing that. Well, now you can do text blast. If you have the telephone numbers, especially with cell phones, you can send a text message to a lot of people all at once. But more recently, we've been playing with the possibility of using one of the oldest technologies for some of our elderly and shut-ins. And that's to take a speakerphone to their house if they do not have one, setting it up, and then calling them on Sunday morning and making them a part of the worship service, so that they can both hear the service and participate in the service simultaneously. We're hoping to do that after Easter for one of our shut-in couples who always complain that they miss coming to the 8:15 service. And that's the both Easter gift we hope to give to them and to the folks who say, how are Richard and his wife doing? So we'll take the cell phone or the speakerphone to their house, set up a speakerphone in the chancel, and at the same time then ask them to both either read the lessons or the prayers as a part of the worship service, and then have 2 members of that worship service then take the communion directly to them after the service. So old technology still has some capabilities in doing what is real presence ministry in today's society. And I think we need to be clear about that we are still talking about this is real presence of the gospel, both in word and in forms, and in the presence of people who are a part of the process, dealing with them and living with them. Now, looking at click to save. We really do need to look at the whole elements of what does it mean to do remapping. I think every one of our congregations needs to be in constant reevaluation and re-looking at who they are, what they are, and how they present themselves. And so a social media profile probably needs to be done for all the team members. And a couple of the congregations that are a part of this course do have teams already in place. And so if you look at, I believe it's chapter 1, at the end of it there is a social ministry survey. And you need to take that for yourself as well as some of the important members of your congregation. How do they perceive you using technology to increase the value of the ministry of the congregation? And that social media profile needs to be done for the congregation as well. We are a community of service. And at that point, we need to be very clear about making sure that if we are doing something, it is achieving the goals that we set out in the first place. And so it needs to be done for both the congregation. How are people who are not involved in the process of looking at the media, seeing the congregation presented, and also those who are friends in the congregation or friends of the congregation in the community, how do they perceive us and what we're trying to really do in using the media that's presented to us. Chapter 2 on real presence. I've already used the term once before. It is an element that needs to be out there. We are the human beings behind any service that we offer. This is a phrase that my confirmation class is bugging me about. We are the face of Jesus presented to today's world. And the kids look at me and go, yeah, right, Pastor. No, I'm serious about that. If it doesn't feel personal to the person who's receiving your ministry, then it's not. And the element of the scriptures that as I understand it, is that Jesus was real presence in everything he did, including last Sunday's lesson about the woman at the well. That was real presence. And so our congregation has to be that voice, that physical presence, that physical face that's presented to someone who is out there saying, now what's this church stuff all about? And so we really are the real presence. We are a congregational voice, and that ought to be presented in the context of anything that we'd use with media. So, like anything else, Chapter 2 talks about our own managing of our time and our boundaries. And as people have said, the internet can really be a time, oh boy, it can take away time. And I probably know that from experience more than anyone else. But at the same time, if you use your time wisely, it is time well invested. And you need to have some boundaries. You need to walk away sometimes. And I know of congregations and pastors who then take communication sabbaticals. A number of people that I know this Lent have decreased their amount of time or eliminated their time on Facebook. That's the personal time. Or they have things stack up. Sometimes on Facebook I'm finding out that I've got 20 or 25 messages from people because I just haven't been there. Part of it is you need to have a strategic plan about how you go about living your life so that you then can be that pastoral presence, that real presence to those who are in need of the services of the church, which means face-to-face communication, as well as those who are away from the church but need your physical presence, how it comes to them through media. So managing your digital time is just as important as managing your physical time in the parish. So that if you don't take a day off from the parish, you're probably not going to take a day off from the computer. Remember that you are a shepherd, and shepherds still need sheep, but sheep need to have a really real presence of their shepherd in front of them, one that is whole and ready and capable of being with them and for them at a time when they need it the most. So please look at the Digital Ministry Strategy Service about real presence at the end of Chapter 2, and they may give you some guidance in terms of the process of looking at the future. I'm really pleased to see the number of congregations that have groups of people looking at this material and walking and talking with one another about how their congregation gets presented. So I'm now sharing this with my office manager so that she can find what that means to be real presence, because when someone walks into our church and asks for food, she is the real presence to everyone who walks in that door. And people don't even know her last name. They just say, is Mary Ellen here? She's been a real presence for 15 years, and I really appreciate the ministry she is doing, but we need to somehow make that ministry broader so that she's not the only one, but that it becomes a part of the life of a congregation. And that, too, is real presence. Thanks very much for your time. Type to you later, and I'll try and pay a bit more close attention to the things that come to me by email. A couple of those things I posted on behalf of folks who had difficulty posting them on the website. Please post in the one location where it says postings are done here, and you'll see the listing of other people's postings. We'll just put them all in one place so that everybody can share by going to one place at all times. And also this week, I'll try and put together the PowerPoint presentations on the weeks in which they were delivered so that you can go back and review those as well. Thanks for listening. Type to you later. Bye-bye.